could look over my own shoulder.
Mad props is what I'll be out for. Mad props as soon as I hit the floor.
Here's another from the youngsters, the mother number funky thugs, straight from Philly Funkster. I should've known right from the start.
This is a little something for the youngsters.
Let's split up.
A little something for the youngsters.
Pass the mic, y'all. Pass the mic. Yo, Tariq.
Why did a group backed by Naughty by Nature, rooted in Philly street rap, and co-signed by legends, get quietly erased from hip-hop history? While Kriss Kross was jumping around in backward jeans, the Youngstas were spitting bars grown men couldn't keep up with. They weren't just little kids with catchy hooks, they had real lyricism, battle energy, and raw East Coast production. So why didn't they blow? The truth? The industry didn't want real, they wanted marketable. And Da Youngstas were too real, too raw, and too close to the streets for the machine to push. They were cousins raised in a basement studio under the shadow of Steady B, trained by rap royalty, and mentored by Tretch from Naughty by Nature. But they got boxed out, outshined, and low-key blackballed, just for refusing to play the industry's game. This is the story of Da Youngstas, the 90s rap group that had everything but success. Ready for Section 1, the origin of the misconception? On the surface, Da Youngstas looked like just another early 90s kid rap group. 3 teenage boys with oversized clothes, boom-bap beats, and energetic performances. So naturally, people lump them in with groups like Kriss Kross and Another Bad Creation. Just another label experiment cashing in on the cute kids who can rhyme trend. But what most people missed is that Da Youngstas weren't industry manufactured. They weren't a product of a label executive's vision. They were born in a basement studio in Philly, surrounded by real MCs. Their father, Lawrence L.G. Goodman, wasn't just some supportive parent. He was the founder of Pop Art Records, the same underground powerhouse that helped launch Roxanne Shante, Steady B, and even a young Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince. These weren't just kids who could rap. These were kids who had to rap. They were raised in the culture, mentored by battle-tested artists, and taught to respect the pen before they even hit puberty. But the industry didn't see that. What they saw were teenage boys in a market already dominated by Kriss Kross mania. And the minute people saw a group of black kids rapping in the early 90s, they assumed it was the same formula. Cute kids, catchy hooks, move along. That assumption alone created the misconception that Da Youngstas were just copycats, when in reality, they were competitors, and that misunderstanding would follow them their entire careers. And the real twist? That misunderstanding wasn't an accident. The industry had already picked their favorite, and Da Youngstas were not it. Here's the hot take. Da Youngstas didn't flop because they weren't talented. They flopped because they were too good for the box the industry tried to shove them in. While Kriss Kross had Jermaine Dupri crafting radio-friendly hooks and styling them in backwards overalls, Da Youngstas were writing their own rhymes, raw, gritty, and grown beyond their years. They weren't trying to be pop stars. They were trying to be MCs. And that was the problem. Labels wanted clean. These boys brought chaos. Labels wanted bubblegum bars. These kids were spitting lyrical homicide. Their first single, Past a Meek, didn't sound like a kid's song. It sounded like Nas' little cousins pulled up to cypher on your block. Karan, Taj, and Tariq weren't mimicking grown rappers. They were rapping like grown rappers. They had real producers too. DJ Premier, Marley Marl, Pete Rock. These weren't cartoon beats. These were the same people producing for Gang Starr and Big Daddy Kane. And when you put those beats under the voices of literal teenagers talking about street life, it didn't just shock execs, it scared them. Because there's a rule in the music industry. If you're a kid, act like a kid. Smile, dance, and keep it cute. The Youngstas didn't do that. They came out hard, and the industry didn't know how to market hard when it came in the form of 3 teenage boys from Philly with actual bars. They weren't safe, they weren't gimmicky, and because of that, they weren't chosen. And when the machine doesn't choose you, you're fighting for attention with no armor. And that's exactly where Da Youngstas found themselves. Brilliant, authentic, and quietly boxed out. Let's clear this up right now. The so-called beef between Da Youngstas and Kriss Kross. That wasn't playground drama. That was industry war, with kids as pawns. See? The minute Kriss Kross dropped Jump in 1992 and went multi-platinum overnight, the music industry threw its full weight behind the idea that cute sells. They had the look, the wardrobe, and Jermaine Dupri pulling the strings. But behind the scenes, it was all B. Meanwhile, Da Youngstas came up through an entirely different system. Their father and manager, L.G. Goodman, who had already built legendary beef tactics into Philly's underground scene, wasn't about to let his sons play second fiddle. He'd done this before. He had Cool C go after LL Cool J. He let Roxanne Shante take aim at UTFO. His whole strategy was built on one thing: call out the hottest act, stir the pot, drop your record. So, of course, Da Youngstas came at Kriss Kross. And they did it raw. No bubblegum bars, no choreographed dances, just straight Philly heat. Their vibe was, you boys are dressed for recess, we're dressed for war. In interviews, they admitted it wasn't even personal. It was just how they were raised in the game. LG raised them to come at whoever was on top. And in 1992, that was Kriss Kross. But the industry didn't like that, because Kriss Kross wasn't built to respond. They were built to sell. They weren't going to get into bar-for-bar battles with kids who actually lived the culture. The media painted Da Youngstas as aggressive, too serious, not fun enough. What they really meant was, they don't fit the image we want to sell. The beef didn't ruin Da Youngstas. It just made it painfully clear who the industry was protecting and who they were leaving to fight alone. And it wouldn't be the last time Da Youngstas were pushed to the margins by the very culture they helped shape. Da Youngstas didn't just come from hip-hop, they were born in it. Their father, Lawrence L.G. Goodman, wasn't some stage dad chasing clout. He was the guy behind Pop Art Records, one of the most slept-on but influential labels in early hip-hop. Pop Art was ground zero for legends like Roxanne Shante, Steady B, and Cool C. And guess what? Steady B wasn't just an influence. He was family, literally. These boys were raised in a basement studio in Philly, where artists like Salt and Peppa, MC Shan, and DJ Jazzy Jeff would walk in and out like it was normal. Imagine being 11 years old and watching legends battle in your living room. That was their childhood. Karan, Taj, and Tarek weren't just fans of hip-hop, they were trained by it. They weren't learning the game, they were soaked in it. When you've got Marley Marl giving your dad beats and Steady B in the family tree, there's no such thing as playing rapper. You either spit for real or you got laughed out the room. So by the time they officially dropped in 91, they weren't just a new act, they were rap royalty in training. But that's exactly what worked against them. The industry doesn't know what to do with kids who aren't naive. Kids who already know the grind, the betrayal, the politics. Da Youngstas weren't wide-eyed dreamers, they were young pros. They walked into boardrooms already understanding publishing splits and beat ownership. And that made execs nervous, because kids who are that smart aren't easy to control. Instead of being shaped by the system, Da Youngstas came in with a blueprint. And the industry would rather work with a blank slate than a group of teenagers who already knew what they wanted and how much they were worth. So the question wasn't, why didn't Da Youngstas succeed? It was, how do you market a group that refuses to be puppets? Let's talk receipts, because Da Youngstas had the kind of catalog most teen rappers could only dream of. Their breakout single, Pass Da Meek, wasn't just a kid-friendly bop. It was a gritty, chest-thumping statement. Karan opened the track with the now iconic line, "Money growing like grass with the mass appeal." So iconic that DJ Premier later sampled that exact bar for Gang Starr's Mass Appeal, one of the most legendary hip-hop tracks of all time. And Nas? Yeah, Nas named his entire label after that line. That's not just influence, that's legacy. But even with that heat, the song didn't chart like it should have. Why? Because it didn't fit the narrative execs were trying to sell. The beat knocked too hard. The lyrics were too sharp. These weren't pre-written rhymes handed to them. They were earned. Their second album, The Aftermath, gave us Cruise Pop, featuring Tretch from Naughty by Nature. It hit number 3 on the Hot Rap Singles chart, proof that they could hold their own with the grown-ups. Mad Props and Hip Hop Ride followed, with more slick bars and nods to Golden Age legends. Oh, and let's not forget, they had Pete Rock, Marley Marl, DJ Premier, the Beatnuts, basically a full-on Mount Rushmore of East Coast producers working on their records. Find another kid group with that kind of lineup. We'll wait. And yet, despite all this, mainstream radio barely gave them spins. Why? Because the label didn't know how to sell 3 teenagers rapping like they were 30-year-old battle vets from the Bronx. The industry had no category for youthful legends in training. They wanted pop stars, not prodigies. So Da Youngstas became a paradox. Too respected for the kids, too young for the adults, and too real for the suits. And when radio ignores you and execs don't back you, even greatness can vanish. If there's one thing that can kill a rising group faster than bad music, it's bad timing and worse business. Da Youngstas dropped 4 albums in just 4 years. Think about that. Most artists can't drop one decent project in 5 years. These kids were working, but instead of momentum, they got overlooked. Why? Because behind the scenes, the label situation was a mess. They started with East West Records, then moved to Atlantic, and somewhere along the way, they got caught in the middle of label politics. The execs didn't know what to do with them. Too street for the teen market, too young for the backpack crowd, no clear radio format, no marketing plan. Just shuffle them around, release the album, and hope it sticks. Spoiler alert, it didn't. By their fourth album, I'll Make You Famous, they were back on Pop Art, an indie label their dad had revived. But the industry had already moved on. Puffy was on the rise, the shiny suit era was beginning, and gritty street-talking teenagers weren't the wave anymore. To make it worse, the group's energy shifted. One member started a family, another lost interest in music altogether. Quran stayed in the game, pivoting into production. But Da Youngstas, the brand, the group, just faded. No farewell tour, no best of compilation, no bet spotlight segment, just silence. And honestly, the industry seemed relieved because Da Youngstas were always a little too sharp, too bold, too self-aware. They didn't just rap, they understood the game. And artists like that, they either get their own label or they get locked out. Their quiet exit wasn't a failure, it was a forced fade. And what happened next proves just how far ahead of their time they really were. Here's the wild part. Even though Da Youngstas disappeared from the charts, their fingerprints are everywhere. Quran Goodman, aka Cue Ball, didn't just fade into obscurity. He became a legit producer, working with names like 50 Cent, Missy Elliott, Slick Rick, Keith Murray, Method Man, and even contributed to Tikal 2000. Yeah, the same kid who bodied past Demick ended up behind the boards for some of your favorite artists. And that iconic mass appeal line? Not only did DJ Premier sample it, but Nas literally named his label after it. That's the kind of influence you can't fake. Da Youngstas also made their mark on TV. They performed on Soul Train, rocked the Apollo stage with Dougie Fresh, appeared on Rap City and Yo MTV Raps, and even popped up in the Hip Hop Hooray video by Naughty by Nature. If you blinked, you missed them, but they were there, rubbing shoulders with icons. They were even credited on In Living Color as musical guests, back when that meant something. Their last official track, Philly Ain't Friendly, dropped in 2020, and showed that even decades later, the fire wasn't gone. It had just been ignored. Their catalog is a time capsule of what could have been if the industry had known how to nurture raw, authentic talent instead of pushing for profit-friendly clones. Da Youngstas weren't a flash in the pan. They were the warning shot no one heard. Da Youngstas didn't lose because they weren't good enough. They lost because they were too good for a system that didn't want them to win. They didn't dance. They didn't dumb it down. They didn't smile for the cameras. They rapped hard, with conviction, with penmanship most grown rappers wish they had. And the industry didn't know what to do with that, so it shelved them. While Kriss Kross got Pepsi commercials and global tours, Da Youngstas were told they were too street to sell, too serious, too aggressive. But maybe that's exactly what made them legendary. Because even without a #1 hit, they left behind something most artists never will, a legacy built on authenticity. They didn't fake the funk, they didn't play the game. And even though the spotlight passed them by, the real ones remember. So next time you hear someone say they were just another 90s kid group, remind them Da Youngstas were the real deal. And that's exactly why they got left behind.